Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to our second night, or second day of fasting, I should say, in Ramadan. It's my pleasure to host tonight's talk show. So normally we would have Sheikh Suhail give a reflection on a certain part of the Quran. But every Saturday, what we're going to be doing, inshallah, is going to host a community talk show. And the series is called Journeys Through Faith. So inshallah, every Saturday night, after Sheikh Salama reads a Quran, we're going to spend until 10 o'clock talking about a discussion, faith-related. This week, we're going to be talking about emotional and mental wellness. We have some panelists that I'm really excited to introduce in a few moments. So what I'll do is I'll introduce the panelists. We'll have a discussion, and then we'll leave. And please feel free to, at the bottom of the screen, you'll find a chat. You can put in your Q&A, or there might also be a Q&A, or you can put your questions in that box. And then at the end, we'll also open it up to answer questions from the community. Really looking forward to hosting you every Saturday, like I said, in our series, Journeys Through Faith. So it's really wonderful to see you all. My name is Lobna Mulla, and I'm your host for tonight. So tonight we have our three panelists. First we have Sheikh Suhail Mulla, and maybe all of these people don't need introduction, but maybe don't know all of the different roles that they have. So of course he's our resident scholar here at Islamic Society of West Valley. He's also the Institute of Knowledge chaplain, Muslim chaplain at UCLA and also at Cal State Northridge, alhamdulillah. And he's also the director of the Khalil Center in San Fernando Valley. Welcome, Sheikh Suhail. You can. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, and our next panelist, we have Sister Yasmin Irfani, mashallah. She is no stranger to the ISWV Masjid and of course to the youth group. She has been their dedicated youth group coordinator for the last few years, mashallah. And now I'm really excited that she is working as the youth programs director at NAMI, San Fernando Valley. That is the National Alliance on Mental Illness in San Fernando Valley. She coordinates and teaches free mental health trainings for community members, especially those of color. We're really excited to have you tonight, Sister Yasmin. Assalamu alaikum. You can, oh, there you go. Assalamu alaikum. Nice to have you with us. And last but not least, we have Brother Zubair Syed. He is, let's introduce him too. Of course, you know him as the Executive Director of Islamic Society of West Valley. He is also a licensed clinical social worker, working primarily at LAUSD, the Los Angeles Unified School District. He is a psychiatric social worker there. And he's usually working in a high school setting, addressing student social emotional issues that impede in their ability to access the academic curriculum, which is super important, alhamdulillah. And he's also at the Khalil Center. He's a therapist there providing clinical services for the Muslim community. So we have a wonderfully mashallah experienced panel tonight. So I'm really excited to have all of you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Lobna. Special shout out, assalamu alaikum, Sister Irfani. Really nice to see you. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Nice to see all of you. So we wanted to get started tonight. Sister Yasmin and Sheikh Suhail, if you can both unmute yourselves. Unless you want to do some singing and no. So what I wanted to start off tonight, and I'll start with you, Sheikh Suhail. And please, if each of you can answer, let's start off by talking about what mental wellness is and emotional wellness. I do think oftentimes people think of it as something looming and maybe something they're not familiar with, so they think it's perhaps some big condition that only other people have. Can you define what mental wellness and emotional wellness is, Suhail? What that means to you?
You can hear me fine?
Yeah, stay close. That's good like that. Yeah, jazakallah khair.
So mental wellness, emotional wellness are very, very important aspects of our being as human beings. You know, as you all know, as human beings, we are very complex in nature. We have the physical body that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endowed us with, our jasad or badan, and then we have our spiritual self that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with, al-ruh. You have al-aql, the intellectual component of the human being, and then you have al-ihsas, you know, the emotional realm of the human being. So you know, just like we are always concerned with our physical health and maintaining good diet, good sleep patterns, a steady exercise routine, and those are very important to maintain your physical self. The same way, it's important that we maintain our spiritual health, and that for us as Muslims, alhamdulillah, is outlined by our specific religious practices. And then also in terms of the emotional, mental self, is another component that is very important that we as you know, as human beings, we take care of. And it's a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these different aspects of who we are. And so emotional, mental wellness, and perhaps Zubair or Brother Zubair or Sister Yasmin could define it better, but is a part of ourself that is often misunderstood. And so sometimes when we talk about emotional wellness or mental health, people assume that you know, make that equivalent with somebody who's, and I don't like to use these terms, but somebody who's crazy or who's this or who's that. But mental health is the general term. It's not, when we talk about mental disorders, then we're talking about particular illnesses that people may suffer within the realm of mental health. But mental health in and of itself is that faculty, that facet of ourselves that comprises how we our emotional regulation system, as well as our biological function, how that impacts our health in terms of, you know, being, and I'm having a hard time articulating at the moment for some reason, but Zubair can help me out, as Yasmin can help me out. But, you know, how we maintain a certain balance, a certain cohesive and productive and beneficial outlook in as it relates to the world, that our intellectual self is in sync with what reality is, and so on.
Jazakumullah khair. And Sister Yasmin, would you like to also share, you know, how can you help the community understand mental and emotional wellness?
Well, I think Sheikh Suhail did a really good job, and my own anxiety is blocking my mind right now. Also, I'm in New York, so I'm like 3 hours ahead. So Brother Zubair, would you like to answer this question?
Sister Yasmin, I'm glad you said that. You know, and that's kind of what I wanted to touch upon. Jazakumullah khair, and Sheikh Suhail, for your answer. And we're going to get to you, Brother Zubair. You know, can you maybe just put in some common language what some feelings people may be having that they normally don't have? Like you mentioned, anxiety, somebody's feeling anxious, you know, during this time of quarantine, and now Ramadan quarantine style, family members together or maybe being separated, and these are things that people are not used to. I'm just wondering if you can speak to some normal human emotions that people are not used to feeling, if that makes sense. You know, can we put some common names to it?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely anxiety. There could be fear of the future, of the unknowns, feelings of instability, maybe even self-judgment, like why am I feeling this way? Am I maybe feeling a little bit extra sensitive or emotional or easily triggered? And not understanding why. So there's so much, and like Sheikh Suhail said, we're so complex, and it's really important for us to be gentle with ourselves during these emotions as they come up.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Jazakumullah khair. And Brother Zubair, can you please also help us try to understand this concept?
Absolutely. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum again, everyone. And it's really nice to see all the new faces, alhamdulillah, that have joined us. You know, I think Sheikh Suhail and Sister Yasmin really spoke to what really mental wellness is. If I can add just a little bit, really it's about coping with life stressors. It's really about the ability to weather the storm of life, if I can say that. You know, subhanAllah, we go through life stressors, we go through unexpected situations. A lot of times life comes at us without us knowing. And COVID-19 is a perfect example of that. And mental wellness is really about staying strong and remaining on course, so to speak, through the challenges of life and remaining resilient. And part of resilience, and one of the beautiful aspects of resilience in our faith, is not only to bounce back when things are difficult, but also to embrace the challenge that comes. We don't ask for difficulty, but when it arrives, we accept it, and we know that it is from the decree of Allah. So it's about coping through all of that and really maintaining on course, you know, mental wellness.
Jazakumullah khairan. I think that helps a lot. I appreciate that because, again, we don't want people to think that this subject tonight just relates to a few people who may have a condition. I think this time that we're experiencing can bring up a lot of different emotions, like Sister Yasmin pointed out, and it's good for us to be aware some of the ups and downs that we're feeling and how that may be affecting us overall. I want to ask each of you, and I'll start with you, Sheikh Suhail, how have you noticed people being affected by the quarantine? How has it taken a toll on people's mental health? What are some of the things that you're seeing, if you can speak to that?
Well, I see the people in my family day in and day out, right? I don't see many other people beyond that. But alhamdulillah, we see some people virtually in these times. You know, these are stressful times. We are living in a way that is very restrictive, constrictive. We feel confined. The word quarantine, even in and of itself, is anxiety provoking. Like, what do you mean I have to stay indoors? I can't go out. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't go do what I'm used to doing. You know, there was an article in the LA Times today about how one of the big, something that's taking place right now is there's a heat wave, of course, that's running through Los Angeles and I don't know, you know, to what other extent, how far beyond Los Angeles, but so people are flocking to the beaches. You know, you have a life pattern that you're used to conducting yourself by. And when you're not able to conduct your life as normal, it brings up certain anxieties. And those anxieties play out in different ways in different people, right? Some people that can lead to, that displays an anger. And some people that displays in going into a depressed state, perhaps sleeping more, withdrawing more. Other people, you know, that may display in other sort of ways. So it's really important for us to kind of be self-aware, and then for us to be aware of those in our family members, and like Sister Yasmin said earlier, to be gentle with ourselves, right? Somebody was saying recently that, well, you know, we're in quarantine, and that means we have so much more time on our hands, and that means we can accomplish so much more, and that means I can do this and that and the other, these tasks that I always wanted to do. But in fact, the opposite is really true. It's very debilitating to be in this state. It's very, you know, we should allow ourselves to not feel, you know, we should allow ourselves to feel uneasy about how we're feeling. Meaning, it's okay to be, to not be fully comfortable with what's going on, right? And we don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to be able to say, well, I'm fully in control. Alhamdulillah, you know, as long as we are maintaining our daily responsibilities on various levels, that's good, alhamdulillah. But to say that we should be producing and, you know, all of this kind of stuff, is really not really looking at the human condition and understanding, and that we have certain capacities and certain limitations, and when our lifestyle is disrupted, it's not easy to produce. It's not easy. You know, the fields of arts and sciences and you know, everything that relates to human civilization and production, that happens only in times of stability. Societies where there's stress and there's, you know, there's occupation in certain parts of, in certain Muslim lands in Palestine and other places, when in that sort of situation, people don't thrive, people don't produce. So we're living in a microcosm of that reality right now.
Yeah, barakallah feek. That's a very deep. Sister Yasmin, what are you noticing? What are people telling you how they're feeling, and what's coming up in terms of, you know, how people are doing during this time? What do you think?
I definitely think it's really surreal what's happening, and it's so unique for each person. Like the feelings, the underlying feelings are the same, but the unique journeys are different. So what I've seen is that there's definitely more of an increase in calls to our warm line at NAMI. There's more demand for support groups and classes to learn about mental health, especially since everyone is just together. So like, how do you communicate? How do you empathize, listen non-judgmentally, all of those skills which are so needed right now. And like personally, because I can only speak for myself, like I think that, like, alhamdulillah, my mental health has improved because I'm like, I have the physical space and the mental space. Like I'm living with my grandparents right now in New York, but I realize that's a privilege that not many people have. So with that sometimes comes feelings of guilt, like, oh, like it's just very complex. But then realizing that my guilt is not serving anyone. So I'm sure that other people can relate to this in some way as well. So since I am feeling mentally okay and well, then what can I do to call others and support them and create that safe space? So like all of our experiences and feelings are valid. So
that's beautiful. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. That's good to hear those things. I think, and hopefully people that are listening can connect to those feelings. I see some comments here, you know, feeling guilty, people feeling guilty, same thing, knowing that they have it easy. Thank you for sharing that. Knowing that they have it easier than others, while other people are suffering greatly. So that's really helpful to hear. Brother Zubair, what are you hearing? How are people struggling during this time?
Yes, SubhanAllah, you know, I'm noticing that people dealing or adjusting to repeated change, right? In the beginning, right, we all didn't think this was gonna last too long. You know, maybe a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks, you know, this is a short vacation. Some of us may have had those thoughts. And as we kind of, as time passed, right, we all had to constantly adjust, readjust to these repeated changes that were occurring. Repeated changes within our daily routines, repeated changes within our abilities to, you know, do our shopping or our work or our engagement with our families, our friends, right? Just repeatedly changing and adapting to this social distancing. And, you know, SubhanAllah, I think that's been the biggest part. I had a student that called me maybe about 3 weeks in, late March, and just talking about how in the beginning she was very excited because it was like summertime. It was like vacation came earlier. But then as time went on, she recognized like there was this new norm that she wasn't expecting, and then starting to feel this level of loneliness and anxiety and sadness, and then not really understanding where those emotions were coming from, and then just kind of acting on those emotions. Maybe that was like withdrawing from people in her house, having low motivation, not wanting to do the work that she needed to do for school. And so I think that, you know, just kind of adjusting through these different changes. And it's really interesting, SubhanAllah, if you look back, and, you know, there's very little literature when it comes to social distancing, right? There's not a lot out there when it comes to studying the mental impact that this situation has on families, individuals, and on a society. But when you look back, you look at like 9/11, you know, statistics show that after 9/11 had occurred, 1 in 10 New Yorkers reported having major depressive disorder. And that's basically where you're having symptoms of depression for 2 weeks or longer. And there was 25% of the New York population reported increased alcohol use. And just this, you know, this is part of what we need to kind of understand, because through this process, we are going to deal with different mental health struggles as a society. And, you know, and that's really important to kind of accept and important to kind of recognize, so that we can kind of get ahead of the game, so to speak, for ourselves and those who we love and we're close to. Now, I was reading an interesting article a couple weeks ago, and an unfortunate article, but a real article. I'm talking about in China, after they had lifted the forced quarantine. The article spoke about how there was a significant rise in divorce, in requests for divorce, submission of divorce papers at the government level. And so that's a real thing, right? That's real, that struggle that we're all kind of adjusting to, being with our spouses all the time, you know, dealing with our kids constantly, not being able to go to work and come back, you know, all of these different things. So really just adjusting to the different changes that
well, what that is, right, Zubair, is that if there are some breaks in relationships, for one, or even within the self, then in time of stress, those breaks, or those, help me with some words here, you know, those particular difficulties that you're having either on an individual level or on a familial level, or as a couple, married couple, they will become stressed even more so in times of stress, right? So families that are healthy, where there are positive relationships, where there is a solid relationship between husband and wife and children and so on and so forth, this might be a time when families are thriving. You know, you're happy to be home, you're enjoying that time with each other and so on and so forth. But families where there's a little bit of strife, there's a little bit of struggle, maybe there's some conflict on some levels, that can be exaggerated at this time, because now everybody's own individual capacity is minimized, and maybe the tempers are a little bit higher, or the fuse is a little bit shorter, and you know, so that extra weight of stress, and especially if there's one member in the household that is struggling with any sort of mental health condition, whether it be depression or anxiety, and if that's elevated at this time, that puts extra stress on the rest of the household as well, right? So all of those things are things that are taking place in many different people's homes.
Yeah. Jazakumullah khairan. And, you know, we had one of our community members just mention that people often say, you know, we're all in the same boat. And of course, as you are just mentioning, Sheikh Suhail and Yasmin and Brother Zubair, that we're not all in the same boat, right? And some of us are feeling guilty because of that. Some of it have it much worse off. And I think that's part of the empathy that were talking about, that we need to have the empathy, that not everyone is struggling in the same way. And at the same time, being gentle with ourselves as we are struggling with our emotions during this time. And we'll get to some of the other questions I saw pop up there. So, you know, and some other, you know, you mentioned, Brother Zubair, about, you know, an increase in China in the divorce rate. And that's an unfortunate reality, like you said. And Sheikh Suhail, you mentioned perhaps there were things that were already brewing and now it's just magnified, right? And unfortunately, we're also seeing reports of increased domestic abuse and domestic violence cases. So what are ways, and we'll start with you, Sister Yasmin, we'll kind of reverse the order here. What are ways in which people can start to recognize that they are not well? We started to allude to it, what it looks like. Maybe can, you know, if you want to talk about what people can do, whether, you know, different coping mechanisms at home, when do they need to talk to somebody? Maybe we can kind of talk about that just to give tips for people who are watching, inshallah.
Yeah, so there's so much, and different people would prefer different things, but a few that I can share are one which I think works for most people is to just check in with yourself multiple times throughout the day. So like, even if we do it right now, like if everyone just pauses, just breathes, and just like ask yourself, like, how am I doing right now? Like so many times we're focusing on asking other people, but it's okay to be there for ourselves too. And asking like, what do I need? It could just be the smallest thing. Like if you need some words of validation, maybe like offer it to yourself if you don't have someone who can give it to you. I feel like self-compassion is huge, and it's something which we haven't really been taught, especially as women. So, and now there's even research backing up all these benefits. So that is something which I think it can help everyone.
What is self-compassion, Yasmin?
Yeah, I was gonna say, thank you.
Yeah, so it's basically just treating yourself the way you would treat a loved one or a friend. It's that simple. So there's so many different techniques. So for one that I can share, which has really helped me, is self-soothing touch. So even just like putting your hands over your heart. As humans, we need touch. Like, and with the distancing, it can be hard for some individuals, but our body responds to like a self-hug or just hands on the heart. So that is something. And then also like when we catch ourselves like being super critical, like, oh, I should be doing this, and why didn't I do that? Why am I feeling this way? Then just stopping and asking like, how would I respond to a friend who is saying the same exact thing to me? And for some people, it's easier to write it out. It could feel a little bit uncomfortable at first because we tend to be so used to that self-criticism like way of being. But I think that is awesome. And then one other tool that I'll say is there's a feelings wheel. If you just Google feelings wheel, it shows like the variety of all the emotions. So sometimes we'll say like, oh, how are you? And the response will be like, fine or good. But with the wheel, it can teach children and youth and even ourselves like to really dive in and see what that means. And as Sheikh Suhail once like told me that like when you name it, you claim it. So just knowing what's going on can help ride the waves of emotions.
Very good. Those are some helpful tips. I appreciate it. And of course, everybody is different, and hopefully what we're going to hear, maybe some of these tips will resonate well with you, and maybe others won't. But the idea is to start thinking what are ways that might help you when you're starting to feel those emotions, and definitely being able to name it. Brother Zubair, can you chime in on this? What are some coping mechanisms that people can do here?
Yeah, no, I wanted to start off with Jazakallah Khair, Sheikh Suhail. I think it is really important to also recognize that for some it's a great experience being at home and being able to spend more time with their loved ones, their children and their spouse and their parents, etc. And alhamdulillah, I think it's understanding that we all kind of go through different journeys in life, and stress is a very kind of individual experience. And really, I think in just really kind of honoring our thoughts, kind of recognizing the different thoughts that come to our mind, and because there's a very strong connection between our feelings and our thoughts. Sometimes what happens is we get we feel, let's say, anxious, and then that anxiety, we jump to an action based on that anxiety, and maybe that's us kind of erupting on somebody that we love. But we fail to realize that between the emotion and that action, there was a thought at the core of it all. That a thought was really kind of what led me to feeling and behaving, acting in a certain way. And so by just recognizing the thoughts that we kind of experience, it allows us to kind of connect the dots of how we're feeling and how we're acting. And then also it allows us to kind of cope with that. Maybe that's letting the thought pass. Maybe that's talking to somebody about that thought. Maybe that's, as Sister Yasmin mentioned, like writing it down. But it's a matter of just kind of honoring and respecting kind of the thoughts that I'm going through and taking it from there.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that you mentioned this thought that comes to our mind, and that's what leads us to kind of act or react upon somebody. Can you give us an example? Because I think this is something that people may not be aware of, and maybe even children of parents that are used to hearing maybe, well, you know, you made me mad, or, you know, it's because you did this, that's why I'm yelling, right? So I think sometimes this may even be passed down generation to generation, that we're not used to catching those thoughts and understanding, well, I have some fear, or I have something that actually caused me to yell or act in a way that wasn't pleasant towards others. Can you give an example, Brother Zubair, or if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this is such a critical point, you know, because a lot of what we're talking about right now is like resiliency building, right? And it's really about kind of staying strong when life stressors happen. And really, it's that connection between our thoughts and our feelings and behaviors. An example would be kind of like I mentioned earlier, you know, the idea, let's say, you know, when COVID-19 unexpectedly happened to us as a society, and we were all forced to stay home, not go to school, not go to work. In the beginning of that, maybe for someone, as soon as they heard, the thought was like, oh, awesome, I don't have to go to work anymore. I could just like be home. I don't have to worry about the traffic. Right? For students, is like I said, right? Vacation came early. And so that thought will then lead us to feeling something, right? We were excited. We came home. We were like energetic. We were, you know, we maybe like binge watched a little bit of Netflix, you know, on the phone with friends. We started sleeping late, right? Summertime kind of schedules, right? Work-wise, we're like not really worrying about the emails yet, right? But then as days went on, right, so that's the thought is like, you know, it's exciting, I'm on vacation. The feeling is, the thought is I'm on vacation. The feeling is I'm excited. The action is I'm going to kind of maybe binge watch Netflix. I'm going to hang out with my family. I'm not going to, you know, do any kind of work-related stuff. Then a few days, a week go by. Then all of a sudden the thought seeps in, oh my gosh, like I'm going to fail. Like I'm not turning in any assignments. I'm not responding to my work emails. And then that thought leads me to feeling anxious, worried, fearful that I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to fail my courses. I'm going to have to repeat the same grade again. And then that leads me to an action, which is I'm going to sleep in. And in that sleeping is a sign that I just kind of want to avoid everybody and avoid the responsibilities. Maybe that's going to, I'm going to be hyperactive. Maybe I'm going to be I'm going to snap at my parents. I'm going to snap at somebody because of these different feelings that I'm experiencing based on that thought. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Absolutely.
Just that, you know, that sequence of events that occur, starting with our thought and our feeling and our behavior.
Jazakallah khair. I think that's such an important concept for us to understand. And I hope everybody that's listening, you know, really tries to take in this concept and understand, you know, how our thoughts affect our feelings and then our actions, and then really hopefully to do some mindful processing when we're starting to feel a certain way, catch it before it gets out of control and we just start taking it out on everybody. Please, Sheikh Suhail, can you add to this conversation? You know, how can people cope with these changing feelings, and how can they cope with, you know, having to either be alone and that's not something that they were expected or that they were expecting to do, or not being able to go out, or being with their family in ways that they have never been, you know, together before?
Yeah, the coping mechanisms are really, really important, right? And coping mechanisms in terms of how you deal with different life stressors can only be optimized and can only have its full effectiveness when you first, before that, are self-aware of what is going on with you, right? Where am I right now? How do I feel right now, as we've been talking about? So that first self-assessment is very important. And, you know, in Islamic terms, you could consider that in the lines of muhasaba, taking account of yourself as far, as the emotional self is concerned. Most of, you know, in our community, that's something that's greatly overlooked. People don't pay attention to this realm of our humanness, the realm of emotions, and you know, and how I'm feeling. And the old generation oftentimes will just gloss it over with, well, you know, I'm just going to read more Quran, I'm going to make more dua, and maybe, you know, you need to pray more, things like that. But but the reality is we are much more complex than that. And so as far as coping mechanisms are concerned, part of it is the spiritual formula. Part of it is turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Part of it is raising our hands to Allah and releasing that which is out of our control to the one who's in control of everything, right? Certain things we overtake our share of feeling responsibility towards, although in reality those things are out of our control. And that this is something, you know, you can say as relates to parents of children, or sometimes even spouses of each other if there's some sort of imbalance in the relationship. So sort of letting go and turning towards Allah and asking Allah for that to help fill in that gap. Ya Allah, this is in your hands. That can be very, very empowering, because then you're putting your energies where you can put them, and what belongs to Allah, and you put that fully on Him, and you unload it essentially off of yourself. Of course, reading Quran and prayer has its place, but there are also other realities that dhikr is very important, by the way. This is something that must be mentioned. Dhikr, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and taking time out of your day at different times of the day, especially if you're struggling with certain things, is very important. And the reason for that is this. Again, because of the finite reality of who we are as human beings, putting our trust and turning our attention to the one who is infinite and the one who has infinite control of everything, again, there is a metaphysical reality to that engagement. But then beyond that, even in terms of just general life practices, you know, simple things, right? One of the nice things that we've seen in these times is people are taking more walks. People are getting out and just, you know, riding their bikes, doing things that are like lost, you know, lost things from humanity, right? Things that we used to do, basic things. People taking care of themselves, right? There's certain outlets are not there, so we need to engage that, right? Take a walk with yourself. Go, if you have a backyard, go roam around in your backyard. If you don't have a backyard, go outside and look at the sky. So, right, sit and drink a cup of coffee in your patio or whatever it may be. But take some time for yourself. Read some material that reading books is also a lost art. Sitting and simply reading a book. Reading a book has much more of will bring you calm. It will bring you, it will stir your imagination. Sitting in front of a screen not only, but it does not have the same calming effect. And in fact, many times it can have the opposite effect depending upon what you're watching. And then you're not letting your imagination do the work for itself, and you're letting somebody else's imagination work for you. So, right, just taking time and to engage in certain practices, what we call self-care, you know, engage in physical exercise or mental exercise, sitting and breathing. Some people enjoy their own, personal exercise routine, whatever that may be, but find out, where I'm at, and then take steps to work towards, coming to a place where you feel better as a person because you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah, Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you. So what it sounds like I'm hearing is that there are different coping mechanisms to help us overcome these constant, changes in our feelings that maybe we weren't aware of in the past. Maybe we just thought, well, I just feel off, or maybe we're used to brushing those feelings aside, but really being able to understand that it's okay to be feeling off or different, or maybe we're feeling, feelings of grief or sadness, and maybe that's displaying in different ways, right? Maybe it's that we're getting into more arguments at home, or maybe we're withdrawing. I read an interesting post online, and somebody shared, I thought I'd share it with you all. Even though I'm an introvert and generally prefer being at home, I need the physical separation between school, work, social life, because being at home is supposed to be the time where I decompress, not have everything jammed in together. So I think it is important, once again, to recognize that everybody's kind of feeling different things. And even when we were like Brother Zubair, you were saying initially we were okay, you know, maybe with all of this, and then now as the idea of staying home longer and longer now became Ramadan, and now most likely Eid, and God knows when, right? And God knows what's going to happen the rest of the year. So even just recognizing that our feelings can change, and I'm hearing from Sheikh Suhail that we can have some spiritual ways of soothing ourselves, from Sister Yasmin some physical ways of soothing ourselves, and from Brother Zubair understanding that by doing a self-assessment and catching our thoughts, that can be very helpful. I hope that these were helpful to you. And lastly, I kind of wanted to touch upon how can we make this balance. So some people, again, they're living alone and they may be having different difficulties in doing so. And some people may be living together with other family members. And within the own family, how do we deal with these differences of some people want just togetherness all the time, and other people are maybe feeling smothered and they don't even maybe realize that. Right? Maybe it's like you're the people person, but all of a sudden you're feeling overwhelmed and dealing with other people. How would you say people can strike this balance? And I'll throw one more balance kind of in there. You can answer this into your question. Sheikh Suhail, you mentioned, finding solace in spirituality. And for some people, they may have had bad spiritual experiences in the past, unfortunately, where maybe hearing the Quran, unfortunately, really brings back some painful memories, maybe because the person that they loved, they maybe, pressured them or spiritually abused them in a certain way. And so just that very thought does not bring soothingness. And for others, maybe some people within the family, maybe it's our elders or people who have a different life experience. They've experienced war, they've experienced being a refugee. And so maybe they're not able to understand other people in their household. Why are you acting this way? We're fine. How do we deal with these differences of emotions and acceptance within one household? It's kind of a mixed bag, but I'm sure people are struggling with this. I'll start with you, Sheikh Suhail.
لقد سألتي عن عظيم. You asked about a huge matter.
I have faith in you. You guys can do it.
God, one of you guys take that, man.
I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, too many to process in one moment in time. Everybody has a different life reality. There's no formulas to life. Do 1, 2, 3 and your life will be fine, right? Pray your 5 prayers and make dua and life is fine. It's not, life doesn't work that way, right? Life is not, we're not black and white creatures. We all have our own nuances. We have generational trauma sometimes, like you referenced, that literally people carry in their DNA certain behaviors that they've inherited from their family in terms of how they deal. So all of these things are there. So everybody needs to really understanding oneself is such an important reality. One of the righteous, he said, "Rahim Allahu imra'an arifa qadra nafsih." May Allah's mercy be on the one that knows the limits of themselves. Understanding yourself is the beginning to all of it. If you don't understand yourself, and if you have removed the process of, as Zubair talked about earlier, how thoughts lead to feelings and then to actions. If you're not in touch with your thoughts, if you don't even know what is going on inside of you, if you're so perhaps engrossed maybe in media or in social media or whatever it may be, and you don't even give your time. So Sister Isa made a nice comment on the chat group, and this chat group is incredible. I can't keep up. People are posting their own tremendous tremendous gems on the chat group. Sister Aisha mentioned that, that the lost art of just sitting with yourself and contemplating life. It's a completely lost art, right? We can't sit with ourselves without having to hold or grab our phone. When Ramadan comes, and we did this exercise last year in the masjid, I kind of paid attention after we would be done with Taraweeh, like 2 rak'ahs, then almost half of the people immediately grab for their pocket to grab their phone to do what? I'm not sure. What time is it? Yeah, it's 5 minutes later than it was the last time you looked at it. Or maybe your wife said, make me tea when we go home. I don't know, what changed in 5 minutes, right? So the
or
concept,
maybe people are screaming, it's time to come home. That's possible too.
That could be, okay, but the constant, right? The constant engagement is really difficult. So I don't think I addressed your question really.
No, you
perhaps.
did. No, you did, Jazakumullah khairan. You did. I appreciate that. That's did you want to add anything else, Sheikh Soul, before I move on?
No, please.
Sister Yasmin.
Okay. I can't remember the question, but I'm gonna just go along with piggyback off of Sheikh Suhail's answer. I think that was really beautifully expressed, the whole being with oneself, and I think that there's a lot of opportunities in this time for healing and for only turning to Allah and ourselves to fill certain voids, rather than chasing dunya and other things that usually can keep us distracted. And but I do remember that I wrote down that I think communication is huge. But how do you do that if first you're unaware of what's going on with yourself? So that's just, I don't even know if that's applicable, but that's what came to my heart.
Absolutely. And Sister Yasmin, I was also talking about, basically we're going to have different feelings within the household, or maybe even if we live alone and we get advice from our parents, or whatever the situation may be, that maybe somebody is feeling fine and someone is not, or somebody, experienced much more difficult situation in their eyes, and they're kind of telling us, well, get over it. I lived through much worse. How do we deal with these type of differences under one roof, so to speak?
That's hard. I'm still trying to figure that out, and I have to say being with myself is really nice because I don't have to kind of deal with that, at least right now, to be honest.
I appreciate that honesty, Sister Yasmin. I appreciate that honesty, definitely. Jazakallah khairan. Brother Zubair, please.
SubhanAllah, Brother Bilal Khan, I wish I can see your video feed, because I'm wondering if it's the Bilal Khan that I know. But, I think you really answered. I wanted to kind of answer Sister Lobna's question, and another question that came on the chat a little while ago, but Brother Bilal just answered it really beautifully, because someone had asked about not being able to experience a milestone like graduation this year, a ceremony, right? Something that you talk about, and you hear from others, that's something that you look back at and you think about it and really kind of remember, and that, how do you deal with that type of a loss? How do you grieve? And I think the really important point here is that we all grieve differently. We all experience the same thing, but we all encounter with the same thing, but then we experience it differently. We feel differently. And so it's really honoring and respecting each other's feelings and not really judging each other's feelings. I think Sister Lobna, you said something in the question about how somebody might be saying, I'm having difficulty, and then someone that they're close to saying, oh, what are you talking about? It should be fine, just suck it up kind of deal. And I'm thinking, subhanAllah, I was thinking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imagine after he came back from the cave and he received revelation, and he came to his wife Khadija radiallahu anha when he did, and and he's nervous and he's shaking, and she's and imagine her telling him, what are you talking about? Suck it up, right? Rather than what she really responded with, which was, comforting him and reminding him of the great qualities that he has, and that Allah would not forsake somebody like him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that example, just as a reminder that it's, from our prophetic model, subhanAllah, then I'm sure Sheikh Suhail can speak to that, the prophetic model of really supporting each other through our difficulties and not breaking each other down when we're difficult. And that's really, really important, subhanAllah. I think that's something that, if I can be honest with you all, we kind of lost a little bit of along the way. Maybe culture played a little into it. Maybe our insecurities played a little bit into it. Allahu Ta'ala a'lam, Allah knows best. But I think we lost a little bit of that. And if we can gain that back, like just respecting each other's journey and reminding ourselves that everybody grieves and deals with emotions differently, then we can allow ourselves to kind of not place our insecurities or place our force our perspectives onto others.
That's beautiful. I appreciate that. Jazakumullah khair. And I hope all of us watching here, we can, if we're already trying to practice this, that we, this is a good reminder. And for those that maybe were not aware of some of the pressures, or maybe they were not being as empathetic as they could be, hopefully now this can be a reminder to change our outlook and our perspective, and really be compassionate with not only ourselves but our loved ones, whether we're living with them or we are giving them advice through the phone or online, inshallah. And finally, I wanted to close with one thing before we ask Sheikh Salamat to come back and end us with dua, inshallah. I wanted to ask all of you just briefly, since I know we're reaching the hour, how can we create new memories? So we talked about dealing with loss. We're dealing with grief. We're not feeling great all the time. How can we focus on creating positive memories, not only for Ramadan, but for some of these lost occasions? And I'm specifically speaking now to end of the year type of occasions like graduations, not only from elementary, but middle, high school. People are graduating from university. People are graduating from some of their higher educational goals. So how can we create positive memories this Ramadan and kind of celebrate our loved ones in some of these ceremonies that they're missing?
So I'm going to turn that question back on you as the mother of our household, because that's your specialty, and that one goes right back to you, Lobna.
Thank you for, okay. So I am a mother of a senior, high school senior, and alhamdulillah, I'm engaging with my daughter who's graduating, and she was feeling sad. She had her different moments. She had some different big occasions that were canceled in terms of competitions, and supposed to be some trips that were supposed to happen, and all the senior activities that were supposed to come along with that. So, really kind of just listening to her ups and downs, and also not exactly in the moment, but later talking about, hey, what can we do when this is all over to honor you? And because online graduation does not sound exciting, so I'm not going to try to pump that up when they're not feeling great about it. But I was asking her, what can we do, when we're able to gather some of your friends, and what are some of the things that we can do while we're in the moment? So I think being able to engage in your loved one and what would help them feel honored and feel special, I think is great. Here's one thing, and I hope she's not watching, but I would also offer to any of you that have a special occasion that maybe do like a This Is Your Life kind of a recording. That would be so cool. I don't know, this is like an old flashback, so I don't know if you remember that. This Is Your Life. Hey, maybe the aunties and uncles and moms and dads, you'll recognize the show. But yeah, like collect memories, have some of your aunties and uncles and best friends make a recording about, or a video, now it's easy with the phone, about special memories they have of your loved one, and then surprise them with a 20-minute video of This Is Your Life. I think that would be amazing, and that might be a nice way to honor your loved one. So definitely asking them, and then trying to be creative, and basically just making your loved one feel special at the end of the day, inshallah. And anybody else?
SubhanAllah, we in our circumstances right now, we have so much, there's so much wonderful things happening online, right? I can join different lectures, I can join different talks, I can join different gatherings like this wonderful gathering, alhamdulillah. But what also might happen is I might spend more time on the screen than I normally would have. And I think one thing really conscientiously we can do to kind of create positive memories is make sure that we carve out time in the day to just like connect with ourselves and the people around us. And maybe, you know, creating a positive memory is making sure that, you know, maybe we kind of gather around a screen as a family together to learn something on a daily basis. But maybe what we do, maybe every single day we carve out time and we all just get together and we like eat together. And, or like for sahur, we wake up and, you know, and we do that together, and we don't have, you know, any other distractions, and really just kind of embracing this unexpected time that we have with each other, with our children, with our parents, with our spouse, right? Just with, you know, subhanAllah, we never had this. I mean, think about that for a moment, right? Like we were hustling and bustling, trying to get like 10 minutes on a Saturday. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with so much more time to be with our family. So just kind of like utilizing old school tactics, if I can use that, you know, to create some nice memories away from all the gadgets and gizmos that we have today. You know, maybe that's playing board games with family, you know, eating together, you know, having a water fight, you know, just like having some fun with our family.
That's beautiful. Jazakumullah khairan. Any closing thoughts, Sister Yasmin?
Well, I'm still processing everything, but I'm just so grateful for this space and for so many people to be interested in this topic. And I'm especially grateful to like you, Ustad Lobna, and Sheikh Suhail for helping me during times when I've gone through mental health issues, and that's empowered me to be able to pass it on and give back. So I'm just so grateful. So thank you all.
That's beautiful. MashaAllah. May Allah reward you. And Sheikh Suhail, any last thoughts that you'd like to share?
No, I just want to make dua for a couple of people. Number one, for Yasmin's grandparents who have been infected with the COVID-19 virus. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring them back to full health. I pray that they're doing better, and especially for your grandfather, and allow him to be back home with you all soon, and you know, to be back with full strength soon, inshallah. Also, one of our other community members asked us to make dua for them. Sorry, I'm taking this opportunity to do that, but you know, this is a blessed time. We have a lot of people with them. Just you're saying Ameen, inshallah, has its value. Sister Fatima Parekh is going through numerous issues and in the hospital, so may Allah grant her shifa as well. It's important that we remember our vulnerable members in our community, those that are sick, those that are struggling in different ways. That is a way of bringing blessing into our own lives, even, and that's a responsibility for us. And that also helps us realize the fragility of our own selves as well. And then the last thing I did want to say is take the opportunity to, you know, that I'm the director at the Khalil Center, as we started off by saying, and Brother Zubair also works with us there. And alhamdulillah, we've been able to serve people in their different life struggles. And so we are here during this time, even in the pandemic, offering virtual psychotherapy to people. We have we have 3 staff members that see clients in the community, members in the community that need help on various levels. So please reach out. Muslims are very hesitant to reach out, and oftentimes we reach out when it's very late in the game. I'm talking about marriages, when marriages are breaking down. And so it's important that we utilize and we, you know, avail the opportunities, the resources that are there in our community to help us to gain to get to a place of full emotional wellness. So I just wanted to say that.
Jazakumullah khair. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I want to thank Sister Yasmin and Sheikh Suhail and Brother Zubair for really offering so much wonderful insight and advice. And we'd like to close tonight, inshallah, with dua from our Sheikh.
Before that,
Yes.
Before that, Lobna, sorry if you don't mind. Can you tell us what's going on in the next few Saturdays? I know you have some special programs lined up.
Yes, I think I mentioned it in the beginning. I didn't specify. So for the next 3 Saturdays, inshallah, we're gonna have the same exact format, different guests, inshallah. One of them will be talking about stories of reverts from our community, inshallah. I'll be reaching out to some of you. We're also gonna be talking about struggles verily with hardship comes ease. Verily with hardship comes ease. That will be another subject, inshallah. And then finally, we're going to be exploring getting inspiration from knowledge, spiritual knowledge, inshallah. So please stay tuned every Saturday at 9 o'clock. And we'll be having different guests. And I really enjoyed being with all of you and engaging in this discussion, especially with our esteemed panelists. We really thank them for their time and their expertise. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khairan. And